I keep trying to think of funny openings I could do for this, but I'm just gonna come right out and say it that 2023 was a interesting year for me, and now I can't wait to tell you about my anticipated reads for 2024. And I'm filming at a new angle today because I don't feel like doing my whole setup over here. So I'm just gonna try and do my best with this. Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Grace and I like to talk about books sometimes on the internet. December has been a wild month for me. I had spent the last 6 months unemployed and now I have 3 jobs happening kind of all at once, and that has just been taking up so much of my time. I haven't been able to read as much as I used to, unfortunately, because one of my jobs is a server now at a restaurant, and of course, it being a holidays, it has been so crazy busy. Even so, in terms of books, 2023 has been a pretty good year, I would say, especially during this last half. I haven't made a video for it yet, but I plan to. My most anticipated read was the second book in the Dark Rise trilogy, which is Dark Air, which was a roller coaster of a second book. And I honestly want to read it again so I can talk about it more in depth because, well, the long and the short of it is that I was away in Italy when my pre-order was delivered to my house, and there was delays with me coming back. My own fault, actually. Not well, it's also the Italian public transportation system, but that's another thing. Because I was just jittering with anticipation by the time I got home, I immediately pounced on my copy and finished it in less than a day. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. I need to know what happens. And that's how I ended up reading it so fast. So I want to reread it again, maybe right around the beginning of the next year, so I can give a good proper review about it. Honestly, it's still a really good book, and I still highly recommend the Dark Rise trilogy. I made a video about it, I believe it was last year, talking about how a year had passed since I had read that as well. Obviously, time is not on my side. To me, it's sort of like the Oscars of book releases happening. You know, like the thing that movies do when they release their like award season consideration movies towards the end of the year. That's sort of been like that for me. Just off the top of my head, I'm sure I'll make a wrap-up, a 2023 wrap-up soon. I just need to finish. Very likely gonna be one of my top reads. I'm currently reading Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have not finished it yet. I was like full steam ahead reading that book, and then I started my new job in that, and then I've been really slowly trickling towards the end, but it's just so good. Definitely, I would say contender. Once I'm 100% finished with it, then I will work on my 2023 wrap-up. But we also have some, like I said, Dark Air was incredibly good, and the finale to the Last Binding trilogy, which I did make a video about. It hasn't been edited yet, but The Power Unbound, the third book in the Last Binding trilogy, so good. And whether or not that Last Binding review comes out before or after this, I'll link it wherever. Those are just a few off the top of my head. That is recency bias, of course. But for now, I want to talk about my anticipated reads for 2024 because I thought this was going to be similar to my previous year, kind of easy, I guess. The thing I do with making my videos is that I try to multitask because I'm really bad at planning and managing my own time. So things that I do, I just try to do at once so I can min-max optimize my time, I guess, which is not good. But anyway, this has been a surprising one for me. I thought I was just gonna talk about 10, technically 9 books, but then the drama with Kate Coran happened, and well, I'm not gonna do a huge deep dive into it because there are so many booktubers, like book drama commentators, I don't know, like book drama YouTubers who've been talking about it, like Jess Owens and Read with Cindy have been talking about it. If you follow the author Shiran J. Zhao on Instagram, they have a 4-part continuing. I'm pretty sure the whole thing has more or less, the dust has been settled at this point, but they have a couple of videos on their Instagram explaining the whole situation. Maybe I'll gotta remember to put cards for that as well somewhere up there or down in the description. But basically, the long and the short of it is that debut author Kate Curran, whose book Crown of Starlight was coming out next year, they were found and admitted to making multiple fake Goodreads accounts to review bomb their fellow debut authors as well as other Greek mythology romance books. And once they were caught, they lost everything. It's really bizarre, and honestly, it really sucks. Like, I understand wholeheartedly what jealousy does to a person, what insecurity and anxiety do to people, depression. In Kate's apology, she did mention problems with substance abuse, problems with depression, mental health medication, and the long and the short of it is that, like, I sympathize with her, but this is way too much work to do. What were you expecting when you were doing all this? And the evidence has apparently gone as far back as February of this year. So really, I sympathize with her. I do not condone these actions. It is what it is. The thing is, I used to be more on top of debuts like coming out the next year, new releases lists and stuff like that. But when it comes to stuff like anticipated reads videos, I kind of just wanted to keep it short. I wanted to keep it to what I knew I would like, because as the years went on, I felt like I'd been having less, I hate to say it, less luck with like a good debut book. Very rarely, like maybe one or two would really stick out to me as like my favorite debut in my opinion. So that's why in my personal list, I've been keeping it off of debuts and more just like authors with second or third books, series with second or third books. But with this Kate Curran drama and the people that she review bombed, people have been really hyping up these debuts like, hey, like these are some of the books that have been affected by Kate's review bombing, Kate's actions. So let's shine a spotlight on these books coming out next year. Most of them were by authors of color, which is why a lot of people didn't really buy her apology, because she review bombed authors of color, not just traditionally published authors, such as this book called Drag Me Up, which is part of a series called Gods of Hunger by author R.M. Virtues. This is an independent author, and it kind of turned out, I guess you could call it a Streisand effect, where, or maybe, I don't know what it's called, where something bad happens to somebody, but it turns out good for them because it brought them attention to their work. That doesn't sound like the Streisand effect, but it's something similar. You know what I mean, right? Where like, because this bad things happen, but now maybe something good can come out of it because other authors can now get some support, get some love. When I heard about this one in particular, I'm like, I've never heard about this before. It's a Black queer retelling of the Hades and Persephone myth, where I believe Hades was a casino owner and Persephone is a trans woman. That's really interesting to me, so I'd really want to check this out now. So this is an anticipated read, but it's not an anticipated read releasing for 2024. So basically the long and the short of it is that my list was a lot shorter until this happened. Let's just get right into it with my anticipated reads for 2024. Woo, I'm turning 25 that year. Oh God. Okay, so coming off number one is a bit of a cheat because I don't know if it's coming out in 2024, but God, I hope it does. And that is Alecto the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I did a video for Nona the Ninth, the previous book in this series, about 2 years ago, if my memory recalls, and I am a pretty big fan of the Locked Tomb series. Tagline, lesbian necromancers in space, but honestly, the world has grown way more than that. It is absolutely bizarro bonkers, like kind of amazing. This world building, the science fiction story. And all the characters are just so rich and so in depth in their own ways. And where we left off with Nona the Ninth, it was like, oh gee whiz, like where are we going with, like where is this gonna go from here? Because honestly, I have no idea. My friends have no idea, because the title character Alecto has been talked about so much throughout the series. And now we're finally where we left off in Nona the Ninth. What's gonna happen? Honestly, we have no idea. So unfortunately though, Goodreads has this on January 1st, 2024, but that's usually a placeholder date and not a guarantee that it's actually gonna release in 2024. So I'm just putting this here now, manifesting into the universe that hopefully we're gonna get an official release date cover, hopefully too, for Electa the Ninth coming out for 2024. I'm praying for it. Next in this list is, I've talked about this before, the Classics Remix series. I believe I've talked about The Great Gatsby one by Anne-Marie Macklemore, and I mentioned my interest in reading the Romeo and Juliet remix, and I have read and I have mentioned the Jekyll and Hyde remix by Kaylin Barron. But you know, this is a series of books. Each one is by a different author, and each author tackles a different classic and they remix it in their own way. So as I said, for example, there has been Treasure Island remixed as I believe it's Chinese fantasy retelling. There has been Robin Hood in I believe it was Arabian or Middle Eastern inspired retelling. Great Gatsby was a queer trans retelling with Latinx characters, and so on and so forth. It's Classics Remixed. Now we have 2024's anticipated Classics Remixed for me, and that is Most Ardently, a Pride and Prejudice remix by Gabe Cole Novoa. I mean, if you know me, Pride and Prejudice is one of my favorites. And this Classics Remixed reimagines a story in which it's Oliver Bennett, who is a young trans man trying to find his place in the world, trying to free himself from the constructs of how his family thinks that he should live his life, and he doesn't want to live the life that they think he should be living because he is a man. And one day, as he is out and being himself as Oliver Bennett, he runs into Mr. Darcy. And even though he had met Mr. Darcy when he was Elizabeth Bennet, he gets to see a whole new side of Mr. Darcy as Oliver Bennett. So I'm really interested in this one. To be honest, I'm actually not a fan of some Pride and Prejudice reimaginings, because to be honest, it just kind of feels like they're all hitting the same beats. If you're gonna give me the same thing, I might as well go for the original, you know what I mean? So this one though gives a very interesting twist in which it's sort of, I guess it's sort of not a mistaken identity trope, but maybe a little bit. It's sort of like the thing about superheroes where the main character in or out of the superhero suit meets their love interest as the hero or as themselves. And I think one of the lessons that Pride and Prejudice imparts is that, like, your perception of someone can change depending on the time, depending on whose story you're hearing from whose mouth, whose perception is colored by their experiences with a person. So this is an interesting take on it because you have Oliver Bennett and you have Elizabeth Bennet, and how are they reconciling with each other, and how are they reconciling with Mr. Darcy in this book. So this one has a really interesting premise for me. I'm gonna give it a shot, see if it brings me a good remix to the table. So this next book coming up is actually the first debut on my list, and is one that many people talk about when they talk about the books that were affected by Kate Coran, and that is So Let Them Burn by Camilla Cole. So this is a Jamaican-inspired fantasy that follows a young woman who has, I believe, single-handedly channeled the power of her gods to save her people from the oppression of an evil empire. And if that wasn't crazy enough, what's gonna happen after all that? So she and her sister attend a peace summit with said evil empire, which is all full of dragons, by the way. And her older sister actually bonds with a dragon of the enemy empire. And the main character's gods are like, the gods are talking to her, it's like, yeah, you gotta kill her now. It's like, what? And so with that really caught my eye, because when the blurb presents this seemingly impossible choice, do you follow your gods or do you kill your own family member? I want to read what happens next. And with this being a Jamaican-inspired fantasy, I'm really interested to learn more about this new type of fantasy rather than the usual Western fare. And there are queer tags in it, LGBT tags in it, so that definitely caught my interest as well. With a premise that engaging, it's kind of impossible for me to ignore it. So if I knew about this before I made this list, I think I would have put it on this anyway, because that is just an engaging hook, and I really want to know what happens next. So really short one, but then we jump right into another debut called Voyage of the Damned by Francis White. So this is a murder mystery set atop a magical ship in this world where, as I believe it's a peace trip or a goodwill trip, the 12 heirs of these magical provinces are sent on this ship to tour the country, basically like a grand, what's the word? The grand tour, I think. Anyway, so it's just rich kids on a magic ship, and they all have powers except for this one kid named Ganymede. And I'm like, this is gonna be a gay book. And Ganymede is like, he doesn't have any powers, so he's kind of the class clown. But when one of the heirs is found to have been murdered, how is Ganymede gonna step up? So again, because this is a debut, I only really know the blurb. And if the blurb hooks me in, I'm gonna check it out once it's released. I mean, it interested me as soon as I found out his name was Ganymede. That's a quick one. We're gonna move right on to the next one. Another debut is The Poisons We Drink by Bethany Baptiste. This is a witchy fantasy, urban fantasy set in Washington, D.C., in which the main character brews love potions. And the main character is found at an impossible crossroads when her mother is killed. She is offered a chance of revenge on her mother's killer by brewing dangerous love potions. I'm really interested in this one because of its premise of love potions, because I'm gonna be like Jessica Chastain in Crimson Peak for a minute. Love makes monsters of us all, you know? And I think with these love potions being illegal, as well as being set in Washington, D.C., I am pretty confident that this book will probably bring up a lot of allegory into our real life issues. So I don't know a whole lot about it other than that premise. So I want to keep an eye on this one because I think it's going to be a really interesting read. So now I want to jump right into the next book on my anticipated reads list, and that is Canto Contigo by Johnny Garza Villa. Now, Johnny Garza Villa is an author that this is my own fault. I've been meaning to check them out for a long time because they wrote two other really interesting books called 1500 Miles from the Sun and Ander and Santi Were Here. And those are just two books that keep coming up on my radar, and I keep meaning to check them out, but then I get distracted by other things, god damn it. Okay, but this one I really want to check out because it is a high school YA book set in a mariachi club. And so we have the main character who was like the top star in his school mariachi club until he kisses a boy at his last competition, but then he has to move to a new school. And in this new school, there's already a top star in their mariachi club, and it's the guy that he kissed at the last competition. Oh my god, so what's gonna happen? I think it's gonna be like a rivals to lovers situation, but set against a backdrop of a mariachi club. Like, I'm incredibly interested. And I think hopefully this will be a good segue into me reading Johnny Garza Villa's other works, and I'm already a huge fan of other Latinx authors such as Aiden Thomas and Anna Marie McLemore. So I think this is just continuing, like, hopefully an upward trend of more Latinx authors and Latinx works getting published. And we're gonna jump right into, because I'm going in this in release order, because I keep forgetting to mention the release dates, but I know editor Grace will help me out here. This is another one of the works that came up in the Kei Korean drama, and that is called To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods by Molly X. Chang. And this is apparently the first in a series. I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy or such, but the premise is that there's this young girl who's been blessed by the powers of death to basically cause death with a touch, and she's given a deal by an enemy prince to work for her in exchange for protection for her people. So another impossible choice. What are these characters gonna do next? Oh my god. And this one is I would assume from the cover alone that it's a Asian-inspired fantasy. And the cover is gorgeous, by the way. I mean, all these covers have been really gorgeous so far, these debut covers. Like, these have all been really good premises, and I am, like, really excited for them, but I'm still gonna keep, like, a level of reservation at bay because a great premise does not a good book make. So that's not to say that I know anything about these. I don't really read arcs. I just read them when they come out. These are books that I'm really excited about because drama has brought them to my attention, and they have really good premises, so I'm looking forward to this. Now, this next one is a little bit of a cheat, but it's also not my fault. It's the second book in the Iron Widow series, Heavenly Tyrant by Shirin J. Zhao. This was on my last year's list, and I'm actually really glad that it's on this year's list as well, because to be honest, I respect the author's decision to delay this by a whole year, and they were very clear about it on their social media that they felt like this wasn't in a good place to be published yet. They still wanted to work on this, so they delayed it by a year. Honestly, I respect that, because I would rather read like a book that's been worked on longer, knowing that it's not ready now, you'll be ready soon, I'm gonna keep working on you a little more, and then you'll be ready. I'd rather do that than have like a rush book come out just so that it can come out earlier. I think that's a good move. It builds up more anticipation, like I'm gonna work on this more, that'll bring up more hype, and this will be released. So far, expected publication April 30th, 2024. Honestly, with Shirin J. Zhao's really good social media presence, I don't think Heavenly Tyrant has lost any steam for its anticipated release this year. I'm hoping it's this year. I respect it if it's a little more time. Honestly, take all the time you need. So again, this is a little bit of a cheat because this is on my last year's list, but this is still an anticipated read based on the new information that I have. So this is on this year's list, and I can't wait to read this. Now this one I'm really excited about because the cover slaps, and that is A Crane Among Wolves by June He. I have read 2 of Jane He's books before, and honestly, I can say with confidence that like they have really improved as a writer. My first book that I read was Silence of Bones. Now that one I was like, this is a pretty solid murder mystery set in the Korean Joseon dynasty. You don't get a lot of those with YA anymore. I feel like a lot of YA is either like a extreme high school thriller or a contemporary romance or a fantasy that could either be really good or kind of okay. A historical murder mystery young adult novel, I feel like doesn't happen a lot. And if they do, I feel like they mostly happen with Western history. This is Korean history. And so far with Sons of Bones, and then they really improved with Red Palace. Because with Red Palace, I really did feel a lot more connected to the characters, a lot more connected to the story and to those stakes, because there was a little bit of a romance in there. With Crane Among Wolves, now we're up to a new period, because the thing is the Joseon dynasty it was like 700 years long, so like we could keep milking the Joseon dynasty for as long as we can, because there's so much to take. There is so much inspiration there. So this one is also incredibly interesting premise, and I believe there is a romantic plot in here as well. And so the premise for this is that we have this tyrannical King Yeonsan, who was a real historical king, as I just looked up, and we have this young girl who reluctantly teams up with his half brother, the prince. And so when they end up meeting each other, they end up on this like path to stopping a tyrant. I love stopping tyranny. I love that for you. Again, the cover is just like so freaking cool, and so far I've loved seeing June He's progression as an author, and so I'm really looking forward to this one. Honestly, it's coming out May 14th. Oh boy, I've been talking a lot. We're halfway through the year now. Releasing June 13th is Alexandra Rowland's next book, Running Close to the Wind. I don't believe I've ever talked about A Touch of Golden Iron. However, I've mentioned this podcast before, and that is Be the Serpent. Alexandra Rowland co-hosts with 2 other authors, Freya Marsk, that I've talked about before, who wrote the Last Binding series, and Jennifer Mace. And they're all fantasy authors from America, Alexandra from England, from Britain, Jennifer Mace, and from Australia, Freya Marsk, and all their perspectives on different topics of literary merit are so fascinating to me. They have been on hiatus for a while now. I believe it's been a couple of years now, but I honestly love re-listening to those episodes. And since they are on hiatus, it's a perfect time to catch up on all the episodes. There are 101 of them, to be exact, give or take. And they all talk about various topics, and they even talk about fan fiction as a real literary work of art to be critiqued, because fan fiction is literature. Yes. So Running Close to the Wind takes place in the same universe, I believe, as A Touch of Golden Iron. I didn't talk about this in this channel because I think it was the middle of when I was working an office job, and I just kind of very sporadically had time to make videos during my office job year, my 1 year of working an office job. I loved A Taste of Gold and Iron. I want to reread it. It is a Ottoman Empire inspired fantasy, incredibly solid world building with a real focus on economics, which is wild to me. And it is a prince bodyguard romance. I love it. Oh my god, it's such a good book. To finally have something else set in the same universe, I'm really excited for it. So this is a pirate fantasy for all you Flag Means Death fans. This is perfect for you. And so the premise is that an agent of the country that was set in the last book, he is like a secret agent and he has stolen a secret. So he needs to find a way to get out of Dodge. He goes to his ex-boyfriend who's a pirate captain, and together they hatch a plan to basically sell the secret off to the highest bidder. However, there are a few obstacles in their path. There's the government official who is after them and the secret. There is a priest who's a new member of the crew who has a vow of celibacy. There are sea serpents, and their breeding season is on the horizon, and it is certain doom for them. Because this has been compared to Our Flag Means Death, I'm anticipating something more on the comedic raunchy side of things. And with the conclusion of season 2, there is a pirate-shaped hole in my heart, and I can't wait to read this book to hopefully fill that hole in my heart. And that is coming out June 11th. Please bear with me. We are almost halfway through. I'm gonna try and run through these really quick, because the thing is, once I talk about it, I don't know how to stop talking. So we have another debut, and that is Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. Now, this one looks absolutely like baller. The cover, gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. This is such like a dark fantasy premise. So the premise is basically is that the main character is the daughter of a blood worker. They all work with blood magic. They work like in the dark underbelly, dark dealings, assassins, spies, and she assassinates her own father. That's right in the premise. There's another character who also has a secret, and he is drawn into the magic of the Vampire King. So there's a Vampire King as well. And there's also the royal blood worker named Isaac, and they're all tangled up in each other's web. Now, I don't really know a whole lot about the premise other than like the general, very basic premise of these 3 characters, but I don't know. I really want to give this one a try. I have been feeling a vampire itch lately. It's because I went to go see the Dracula Comedy of Terrors off-Broadway show the other day, so I have been feeling a vampire itch lately. And with this new premise of blood magic, assassination, it seems to be a very brutal type of story. So that's something I'm really interested in as well. I don't believe it's YA, but if it is YA, sometimes I'm a little worried when YA claims to be brutal, but honestly, they're still kind of pulling the punches a little bit. This one I'm interested in to see if they'll pull any punches. And I really just want to like really get into something real dark and gritty. And also this is a queer book as well, so I'm wondering how that is going to play into it. Because there's not a lot of information, I think that's a good tactic. If you give just enough information to make it interesting, not give too much away. That's what I think can really draw like potential readers into a debut book. Moving on to another one quite recently announced, but honestly already looking forward to it. This is a contemporary romance by Casey McQuiston called The Pairing, coming out in August of next year. This is, I believe, a return to adult fiction. Red, White, and Royal Blue is kind of in a weird transitional area between young adult and new adult. It's like high young adult, but like new adult. And one last stop too. Shara Wheeler was definitely a little bit more in the YA sphere, but this one seems to be pretty adult, because the premise of this book is that there are these 2 exes. There are these 2 exes, and for one reason or another, they end up in the same travel group around Italy, which is fun because I just got back from Italy. Literally the day after I got back from Italy, I went to the Casey McQuiston event for the One Last Stop special edition at the Strand. So that was fun. And I talked about how I was in Italy and how I'm looking forward to this book because there's a whole part happening in the Chianti region, and I spent 2 weeks there, so I'm gonna be so knowledgeable. I'm gonna shove all my wine knowledge in your faces. Anyway, so there are these 2 exes and they're on the same wine trip to Italy, and they're bitter exes, but they're like, you know, we're so over each other, right? We're so over each other. We're gonna sleep with as many people as we can on this trip just to prove how over we are about each other. That's just like a very incredibly funny rom-com premise to me, and I think can really showcase a lot of different queer relationships. And I just can't wait to read about these disaster bisexuals because if there's one thing I love, it's food and fiction. So I'm really looking forward to this one. And like I said, I'm gonna slam y'all about wine. I know too much about wine. We're almost done, guys. So we're moving on to another one that I'm really excited about. Honestly, like I keep saying that, but I'm really excited about all of them. And that is the next book after the Sunbearer Trials called Celestial Monsters by Aidan Thomas. I talked about the Sunbearer Trials, I believe it was October of last year. Honestly, I've just become like a really big fan of Aidan Thomas's work. Where the last book ended, I predicted one plot twist. I did not predict the second plot twist. So it's releasing September 3rd, 2024. I'm really looking forward to this. I want to know what happens next. So another one that really caught my eye, thanks to its cover, is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft. I've read another work called A Far Wilder Magic, and I really enjoyed that one. And with this one, this is like a queer gothic romance. And again, the cover looks gorgeous. It kind of gives me a little bit of the same vibes as A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee, which both include like two girls kind of working together, kind of working against each other. So the premise of A Dark and Drowning Tide is that you have this girl who's on an expedition to find this magical spring that grants like unimaginable power, and she's being sent and this expedition is being sent on behalf of the king. Now, there is also a murder mystery when her mentor is murdered on the ship that they're on. While she is working to find out who the murderer is, the one person she knows the murderer is not is her academic rival. And so now they have to find the murderer before they might strike again. On top of that, because they're in an expedition to find this magical spring, they also have all the weird, wild stuff happening around them that they have to like fend off as well. So it kind of is also giving me that movie that kind of flew under the radar that I kind of actually did want to see, but I didn't have time to see, called The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which is a Dracula story. It's kind of giving me those vibes. So you have like the dangers of the expedition and the dangers of the outside world, but then there's also the danger inside your house, or in this case, your ship. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. The cover is gorgeous, and I really liked Alison Saft's other work, so I'm going to definitely check this out as well. Now, we're coming up on the last two. This one I'm going to keep saying it, I'm really excited about, and that is Sword Crossed by Freya Marsk. Sword Crossed, I have been hearing about for years because I listened to the podcast Be the Serpent. So honestly, now that it's actually getting a release date, I'm personally really excited about it. And also, it's being released under the new Tor imprint called, what was it called again? Editor Grace will help me out here. Thank you, Editor Grace. Sword Crossed follows a young man who is kind of forced into a marriage, an arranged marriage. And in this world, the custom is to hire a best man. I don't know if this was like a myth. You know, one of those things where like one of those like facts, quote unquote, that like keep repeating itself until like it's become sort of like a myth in and of itself. So like, I don't know if there's any like real historical accuracy to this, but like the idea of a best man, you know, you have your groom and he has his best men. The idea of a best man is to defend the groom should anyone come in to oppose the marriage of the bride and groom, or in case if the bride gets kidnapped. Basically, he is their musketeers. He is the homie. Like he is gonna be the guy who will draw a sword against anyone who messes with him. In this world, you actually do have to hire a swordsman to be at your wedding and help defend you should anything happen. In this case, the main character hires a con man. And since he's been hired to be this groom's swordsman, he's been giving him sword lessons, and then sparks fly from there, and then there's other forces at work around them, blah, 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 but the swords do cross. Wink. This seems to be a standalone, which I'm really excited about. personally love standalones and series both equally, but I think this is going to be an interesting, I guess, transition point if Freya Mars decides to do another series again. With the way that the last book in the last Binding trilogy left me, I'm just like breathless for more of her work, so I'm really excited about this. So finally we are up to the last book that I'm really excited about for the year of our Lord 2024. God, this is gonna be a pain in the ass for Editor Grace. I'm so sorry. So the last book that I'm really hyped for is maybe it's the last book in the Burning Kingdoms series. The Lotus Empire by Tasha Suri. I've talked about the Jasmine Throne, and I don't believe I've talked about the Oleander Sword on this channel, but I enjoyed the Jasmine Throne quite a lot for its incredible world building, its depth of characters, and the way that they all interact with each other, and with the way that it explores different aspects of empire. It explores different aspects of the way that stories are told and how revolutions are held through the power of stories and storytelling and the power of belief in different gods. With the way that the second book progressed, it took incredibly interesting turns that I am so excited to see explored more in third book, which we finally have a hopefully accurate release date for. This has been anticipated for me for a while. Where we left off in the Oleander Sword, it was tough because where we left off in Jasmine Throne versus where we left off in Oleander Sword, they're both in really contentious parts in each of the main characters' lives, particularly Pyrrha and Malini, their relationship and all the different forms it had taken, like who they are to each other keeps changing. That's not a bad thing because it's the progression of their relationship. And so where we left off, again, as any good book would do, it leaves you wanting for more. So now that we finally have a tentative release date for Lotus Empire, I'm really interested to see what happens next. Anyway, finally, that is more or less all of my anticipated reads for 2024. This is going to be a pretty big year. We have kind of leaving the year off with a bang, all this like book talk drama. My God, there's been so much. I don't even remember most of it. I do remember like, oh my God, there was like the freaking hockey romance girlies who like actually got in trouble with a hockey player. There's been Kate Coran. And we have the newest development of a woman trying to copyright the sun. Wow. So to close off this video, I'm going to leave you all with one piece of advice. To the hockey romance girlies out there, there is only one hockey romance, and that is Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu. Kiss your fandom friends goodnight, and I'll see you in the next year. Bye! Mwah, 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 mwah. Don't get into any drama while I'm gone.